Article 127 of the Family Code of the Philippines states that the separation in fact between husband and wife shall not affect the regime of conjugal partnership, except that the spouse who leaves the conjugal home or refuses to live therein without just cause shall not have the right to be supported. When the consent of one spouse to any transaction of the other is required by law, judicial authorization shall be obtained in a summary proceeding. In the absence of sufficient conjugal partnership property, the separate property of both spouses shall be solidarily liable for the support of the family. The spouse present shall, upon petition in a summary proceeding, be given judicial authority to administer or encumber any specific separate property of the other spouse and use the fruits or proceeds thereof to satisfy the latter's share. Article 127 provides for the effect of separation in fact between husband and wife, and it is exactly the same as Article 100. So let us discuss the first exception, which will affect the regime of conjugal partnership. So, first, the spouse who leaves the conjugal home or refuses to live therein without just cause shall not have the right to be supported. If one spouse leaves the conjugal home or refuses to live with the other spouse without a just cause, they lose the right to be supported. This provision is grounded in the principle that both spouses have an obligation to maintain the marital relationship, which includes living together and contributing to each other's well being. Just cause for separation could include reasons like physical or emotional abuse, extreme cruelty, or irreconcilable differences that make continued cohabitation untenable. If the spouse leaves for one of these reasons, they may still be entitled to support. So, if it's without just cause, for example, a spouse who leaves the marital home without justification, so example of this one is simply choosing to live apart, is not entitled to financial support from the other spouse. This rule encourages the fulfillment of marital duties and discourages abandonment. Okay, so let's go now to the second exception. When the consent of one spouse to any transaction of the other is required by law, judicial authorization shall be obtained in a summary proceeding. Under the conjugal partnership regime, certain transactions involving property require the consent of both spouses. If one spouse is unavailable or refuses to give consent, the other spouse cannot proceed with those transactions alone. In such cases, the spouse seeking to act on behalf of the partnership may petition the court to grant judicial authorization through a summary proceeding. So, what is a judicial authorization? This is a simplified court process that allows one spouse to perform necessary transactions, such as selling property, encumbering assets, or entering into contracts. When the other spouse consent is required but unavailable, the summary proceeding ensures that actions affecting the partnership's property are legally valid, even in the absence of one spouse's approval. And the last exception. Okay, so in cases where there is insufficient conjugal partnership property to meet the needs of the family, both spouses separate property, for example, property acquired before marriage or inherited during the marriage, may become solidarily liable for the support of the family. Solidary liability means both spouses are equally responsible for the family support, regardless of whose separate property is being used. This ensures that the family's needs are met even if the conjugal property is sufficient. If the spouse present, the spouse who remains at the marital home or is seeking to provide support, needs to access the other spouse's separate property to meet the family's financial needs, they can petition the court for judicial authority to administer or encumber, for example, pledge, sell, etc., the absent spouse's separate property. Through a summary proceeding, the court can grant the present spouse the authority to manage or sell the other spouse's separate property and use the proceeds to fulfill the absent spouse's share of family support. This process ensures that the family's needs are prioritized and provides a legal way to access resources if one spouse is not contributing. It must also be important to note that any debt incurred for the support of the family is a liability of the conjugal partnership of gains. Hence, if one of the spouses left the conjugal home with or without justifiable reasons, any debt incurred by any spouse for the benefit of the family shall be chargeable to the community property. Their separation, in fact, will not justify the non liability of the community property.